Welcome to this week's Eccentric Minute, brought to you by Eccentric. Our first exercise here in the Eccentric Minute is the kBox squat. This is the granddaddy of all of them, guys. One that we use at all levels of our training with a vast array of athletes. A couple big tips. I like to use something for our hands to support it. Make sure that strap is completely taut at the top. Don't leave it short, don't leave it long. What I really like the most about it, guys, the isoinertial wheel, we're going to use this with other squats as well. The other squats are working to depth. These, we're going to get to an athletic position and work our way up. Push hard and make sure you're fighting to hit that braking force. As we cut reps, we usually cut depth as well to make it a little bit more transferable to what we do. This is an awesome exercise that I can't recommend enough. Throw it in your training. It's going to be great for you and your athletes. I really hope you enjoyed this week's Eccentric Minute. Make sure you check them out at eccentric.com to find out everything you need about the kBox and the K-pulley. Before we get to the show, let's play a little game of name association. When I say the names Hank Krasenhoff, Dr. Natalia Verkhoshansky, Brett Bartholomew, Dr. Charlie Weingroff, Dr. Brian Mann, and Dr. Fergus Connolly, what do you think? Well, if the answer to that was they each have multiple lectures in the Strength Coach Network, then you would be right. On top of these sensational lectures from these 6 world leaders, we have well over 100 additional lectures from some of the top practitioners in the world, along with an extremely active forum where there's coaches from all over the world discussing everything in the strength and conditioning world. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPs and you'll get your first month for half price. So either hop over to strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPS or go ahead and hop down to the notes and click the link below to get your first month at half price. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with SIUE's Assistant AD for High Performance, Mark Jamison, to discuss the implementation of flywheel training. After a quick little rundown of how they started getting involved with training with isoinertial work, Mark starts talking about how they really dove in with the use of it with return to play and injured athletes, being able to train around specific injuries that some of their student athletes have. This leads them right into the rabbit hole about talking about KPIs and how they're developed and what they're looking at, and how the flywheel has not just impacted their KPIs, but force plate measurements, and even the RPEs that the student athletes provide through the workouts. Mark then shares with us how they're looking at velocities and how these outputs with these flywheels have shown to be greater than with the barbell, and how that impacts not just their barbell training, but their plyometric training and other choices that they're doing outside the weight room with their student athletes. This is really an awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Mark, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Listen, I'm pretty fired up for this one. We've been rapping about some things through the email and getting things ready for this. I'm excited for this talk. But, for those listening out here, let's let them know who Mark is, where you're at, and how you got there.
So I'm the Assistant AD for High Performance at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Been here going into my 4th year. The transition from Director of Athletic Performance to this new position just happened within the last month. Prior to that, I was at Bradley University. I was the Assistant Director with Cody Roberts there. And then I did a graduate assistantship with Nate Brookerson out at Eastern Washington University. And then prior to that, I was at University of Iowa for an internship. So yeah, that's kind of my path to where I'm at here. We're trying to get a lot accomplished here at SIUE. We, as a staff, work with all of our 12 team sports. I specifically oversee men's soccer, men's basketball, and softball. But then obviously oversee athletic training, sports nutrition as well. So, yeah.
A lot of hats and a lot of busy time, sounds like right there.
You know it.
So you're doing some pretty cool stuff with some isoinertial stuff, excuse me. Let's start there. Let's start rapping about that. First of all, why that? Let's start there, and then let's build into what you guys have been doing and building with it.
Yeah. So I was first exposed to the kBox, I want to say it was 2013, 2014. Roughly after I'd just taken the Bradley job, and I went back to visit all my mentors at the University of Iowa, and Landon Evans had just gotten a kBox there. And I was doing some squat patterns, some RDL patterns on it, and just super intrigued by it. So I wanted to dive into it as much as possible and get a lot of research on it. And where I was at SIUE, we didn't really have any opportunities. There's no pit shark opportunities or anything like that for our injured athletes. We had a couple hack squat machines, but with our wrestling team, that's majority of those guys have shoulder injuries that, shoulder, knee, hip, and there's so much stuff that's we need to create modifications for that they're not able to do the hack squat. So what can we do to try to get as much lower extremity training in as possible with the equipment that we had, and it just wasn't possible. So I purchased one kBox, and pretty much for the first year I had it, only used it for our injured athletes, all lower extremity injuries to start with. And the ease of use, I think, was probably the thing that stuck out the most. You got 3 or 4 guys with knee injuries, ankle injuries, soft tissue, whatever it was that they're working through. And I could get 4 guys in, 4 sets a squat, and it was significantly faster than I could get, loading, unloading plates. And the feedback I was getting from the athletes was awesome. I hadn't started tracking things on the K meter at that point in time. So most of it was just subjective feedback. But then when they were kind of coming back from our return to play process and we started to get into our key performance indicators, sprinting, jumping, our RSI outputs, they were significantly higher than pre-injury, without doing what we had been training at what would have been our full outputs. So then I purchased the K meter for that, was one of the kind of initial K boxes, and started to track the actual outputs, and just saw, what I was seeing from force outputs, velocity outputs was comparable and if not more than what we were doing on barbell training. So then I just went to the athletic director and said, hey, we need to get more. We need to put some money in and trying to get as much of these as possible to start using it with all of our teams and not just injured athletes. And so when we first got a few more K boxes, it kind of became the in-season training. So kind of a low system load approach. What I can get in one set of 15 to 20 reps is more than I can get, in 5 sets of 4, on a barbell. And obviously the stress of racking, unracking, and changing weights and working off percentages and so on and so forth, to tell an athlete in season, hey, I know you're tired, I know you're fatigued, you probably don't necessarily want to be in the weight room for an extended period of time. All I need is one set, 15 to 20 reps, give me max effort, and then to give them the feedback on the K meter and show them, hey, we're getting almost more work than we were on a barbell in that amount of time. That's kind of where it first got started. And then we saw, our key performance indicators throughout the season, we were continuously hitting higher numbers as we progressed to what would have been our conference tournaments, going away from what our traditional training methods were. So then we started to overhaul it in the off season and things like that. And that's when it really kind of hit the ground running, to where all of our 230, 250 student athletes were using it. And it became either a huge part of what they were doing or to supplement what they already had been doing.
So how huge of a part of what they were doing did it become, like breaking it down into the program? And then on top of that, what were you using in season as the exercises with the box?
So kind of what it's become to overtake some teams, like men's basketball example, their primary bilateral pattern is for a squat pattern is the kBox. That's a group of guys that, they go through our extensive risk profile analysis. Biomechanically, that's the most efficient pattern for them is the kBox. We can harness or belt, and that allows them to be able to put their hands on a rack. So it's an assisted squat. They still get the force outputs that you would from a barbell, but now it's much more orthopedically sound. It's biomechanically more efficient. And we can train it for traits. We can train it for velocity based on what inertia we're using and things like that, tracking from the K meter. Now, obviously understanding that I still need to make sure we get maximal hip and knee flexion. So a team like men's basketball, that their primary squat pattern is the kBox, we'll still through, corrective exercises or whatever you want to call it. We'll still do a lot of cook squats and bootstrap squats and R&T squats and things like that within the warm-up. So we still get maximal, knee and hip flexion, and we're still training the pattern, and developing the pattern. But when we train for traits, we go on the kBox, and that's where they get their work done. And then you have a team like softball and baseball, for example. we just kind of break it up into tiers. So our early progression tiers, like our incoming freshmen or JUCO transfers, things like that, they might goblet squat into a transformer bar squat. And instead of doing excessive time under tension, they will get their time under tension and their eccentric volume from the kBox. So we'll actually be able to start adding load for those guys and train that squat pattern. And then we just on the back end, finish with like a 1x20. And that's kind of our tempo work. For our higher tier athletes, our tier 2 or tier 3 that have a higher training age, have been around for a while, have exposed, they have, a pretty high level of strength. They'll get right into, isometric training, things like that, overcoming isometrics, and again, continue to use the kBox to hit their time under tension, hit their volume, and then we can start to contrast it. So, you look at PAP principles and things like that. The kBox is by far our best tool when it comes to getting PAP training in. So that's kind of, it's incorporated in a team that still squats, but that's a movement that we use to assess where they're at in that point in time, and then to help supplement the squat pattern. We've gotten more and more into pulling patterns on it, so we try to RDL as much as possible. Again, the hinge pattern is by far one of the most beneficial patterns. And once we've developed the hinge pattern through RDLs, barbell RDLs, and we'll use tempo methods there, then we'll put them on the kBox. And the velocity of what they're moving it at is comparable to a kettlebell swing. But again, we're getting significantly more, eccentric breaking rate of force development. The force at zero velocity is significantly higher on a kBox than it is with just a traditional kettlebell and things like that from our higher end ballistic hinge patterns. And then we did, for the most part with the kBox, a lot of our bent over row patterns, that's kind of where we would start from. And the nice thing about the kBox is like the start and the finish is the kBox, because it's all about the inertia that you put on there, the velocity of which you're trying to move the pattern. But primarily we use it for the most part for our squat patterns and our pull patterns globally across all teams. And then some of our more advanced teams or teams that train and have higher frequency in the weight room, we'll do like bent over rows and things like that. Now our men's basketball team and wrestling team, things that we want to work hypertrophy, they might do metabolic circuits on there where they do a Zercher squat into an RDL upright row, into a deadlift into a curl, and that's good 40 to 60 seconds time under tension. It's a good metabolic effect. And then two, it only takes 2 or 3 sets, and they're getting a good, hypertrophic benefit from it. And then we use the K-pulleys as well. K-pulleys was a new addition that we got last year. That's been huge for our baseball, our overhead athlete teams. We didn't really see any oblique or lat injuries this year, soft tissue wise. And whether or not you can attest that to the K-pulley, that is something that we prioritize from a pulling pattern.
I love it. So how has your work evolved with the addition of the pulley then? Let's get into that.
I think it's really taken our rotational work and just to an extremely higher level. Rotational work, it's difficult. You work your pull-off presses, your chops, your lifts, things like that. And you can only intensify it so much. You can try to go split stance, single leg stance, things like that. But then again, you're getting too fancy, and the velocity and the force at which you're working at, you're not having to overcome a lot. So then we're kind of limited to partner passing, med ball throws, and things like that, where you're getting that eccentric catch and then trying to rebound that throw. So we use that now as our precursor to get into the kBox, because at the kBox we can now significantly intensify our chops, our lifts, our pull-off presses. We can get a lot of, for our baseball athletes, the lower extremity side of things, how they produce force into the ground is pretty much identical to what they have in the box when they're actually swinging. And we just add the implement of the K-pulley in with that. So we get not only rotational power, but we also get that anti-rotation benefit because of the high eccentric load coming back. So from a power output standpoint, it's been huge. You can track that with the K-meter on the K-pulleys. So we can actually, leaderboard guys and things like that to show them, this is where you start at. This was your baseline. Here's where you're at now in terms of force outputs from a rotational standpoint. So the specificity of key performance indicators have improved. And then two, you get some, like we do weighted bat program and things like that. Prior, when we did weighted bat program, I'm not sure they were fully prepared for it. The volumes obviously is something we need to talk coaches about, but now that we've been able to add rotational work in with the K-pulley, we've seen significantly less injuries with that program. They've seen more benefits from a techno-tactical standpoint. The pitching coaches and things like that have told us, our hitting coaches have told us. So really the K-pulley has been huge for our rotational work. And then it's a way to overload. We do 2-to-1 rows with our K-pulleys, and that's been a huge benefit. Again, just get that overload pattern for the lats as much as possible. You talk about subsystems. I mean, that's huge for our posterior oblique and anterior oblique subsystems and their ability to work synergistically to overcome that high amount of eccentric force. So that's where it's really had a huge impact within our training program.
I love that, and I love the fact that you keep coming back to these 3 really hot letters that everybody's talking about right now. That is KPI. Something that's always fascinated me about key performance indicators is what are you selecting, why are you selecting them, and how are you using them to actually dictate training?
So a big part of some of the things that we decide to use as key performance indicators is honestly meetings with sport coaches. So we meet with all the sport coaches, key attributes that you need to see out of your athletes, because obviously the athletes want to see that what we're training in the weight room has some kind of transfer or carryover to the field. So if we're using similar verbiage to what the sport coaches are using, and that's kind of what they're testing or assessing them on, we try to implement that as much as possible within our key performance indicators. Now, a lot of it could be softball and baseball, like first step off of the bag. That can easily be our acceleration, but that can obviously as well be like RSI mod on the force plates and things like that. So we take what we're already testing and just kind of input it into what their key attributes are. But for us, power output is by far one of the biggest things. RSI is another tool that we look at as much as possible. EUR, eccentric utilization, is a huge readiness monitoring tool for us. That also lets us know where you're at that point in time. And then speed, change of direction are the ones that we hit as much as possible. Again, those are things that you do within team sport constructs. In a lot of our teams, we're fortunate to have GPS units with 5 of our teams. That's information that they see on a daily basis is their top speed at practice. So again, they want to see that what we're doing from our key performance indicators are actually helping them improve their acceleration. It's actually helping them improve their top end velocity and things like that. So those are the primary key performance indicators that we look at. We try to find ones that we're going to train year round. It's not just going to be that point in time. And we obviously use as much as possible residual training effects through block periodization. So we're always continuing to build on the same stimulus. But those, sprinting, power, change of direction, we train that year round. So we test it year round. So it just becomes kind of that continuous monitoring, readiness tools and things like that. But sharing the information with the athletes, sharing the information with the coaches, and hopefully trying to get them to buy into the transfer it has to what they're doing in their actual sport.
Love it. Now you're measuring things on force plates. So what have you seen then have been the big changes in these outputs since you've made the change to using more isoinertial training?
So your ability to put force in the ground is significantly higher. I mean, you think about the only other way to really develop that with traditional training is plyometrics and speed work, obviously. That's very taxing on the nervous system. And we get a lot of concentric output. So, from zero velocity to toe off in terms of jumping, things like that, we get that through barbell training. But it's really hard to get the loading phase down because even, doing a hang power clean or high pull or something like that, the rate at which you're putting force in the ground is nowhere near the rate of what you do on the kBox because it's dictated by what you do concentrically. So if I put, 2,500, 3,000 newtons concentrically into the kBox, it replicates that and more on the way down. So obviously I learn how to load into the floor that much more efficiently. And the biggest thing is, talk about force plates, the eccentric breaking rate of force development, your ability to overcome that high amount of force into the ground has decreased the amortization phase. So our RSIs have significantly improved because of your ability to efficiently absorb, put force in the ground, but absorb it and redirect it at a high rate.
I love it. And I'm really happy to hear. And I do this show because more often than not, I want people to say things that are going to make me question what I'm doing. But yeah. I'm really happy that I didn't just waste a summer with one guy. Like my reasoning behind like some of the we use it quite often, and I use
Mhm.
it extensively with people coming back from injury. And then our bigs, I'm starting to use it more and more with,
Right.
because of that second jump or that second impact with the ground or whatever we want to call it, um, and that ability to have, because I think all too often, and I'd like you to run with this after this rant.
Mhm.
I think all too often with what we do, and Moyer and I have talked about this a lot, and it might be a Doc thing. I'm sure it is, because if Moyer and I are talking about it, it somehow goes back to Doc Yeses. We always worry so much about our ability to absorb force, how we absorb force.
Mhm.
And I think it's Doc says it's how you withstand force. Like, I'm not Captain Marvel. Like, I don't have the Infinity Glove. Like, I can't
Right.
sit here, or Gauntlet. Sorry, Sean Fantuzzi, excuse me for the mistake. I can't absorb this force and like fire it back at you. Like, I
Right.
have to withstand it and go the other way. Um, and I think that it's sensational with that. And again, knock wood, I think that we've done really well building it around one of our big guys. So, like, run with that idea a little bit.
I mean, yeah, I think the way to train that as much as possible. Again, you talk about withstanding it to be able to reproduce it at a high rate. We're typically looking at hex bar, trap bar jumps, barbell squat jumps and things like that. But the compressive nature of that and just the internal cost of those exercises is so high that you have limited exposure to it. And you try to do things at a high frequency. It's very difficult to do that without putting too much and creating too much stress for the athlete. Where the kBox, we get our subjective feedback from athletes. The RPEs are significantly lower than anything they're doing on a barbell. The velocity at which they move it at are significantly higher. So I think just the overall buy-in for the student athlete is so much higher on the kBox, and we're getting the benefits of what trap bar jumps or squat jumps, barbell squat jumps would be without that significant compressive force, because I'm obviously not leaving the ground and then having high amounts of ground reaction forces. I'm getting very similar force production and absorption, but without actually leaving the ground. So again, you talk about bigs in basketball, and all they ever talk about is, hey, patella tendonitis, tendinopathy, whatever it is, my knees always hurt, my back always hurts. You typically don't tend to get that feedback on the kBox, so their effort, their intent level is so much higher because they perceive it as being that much more beneficial, and they don't perceive it as a threat where they perceive some of the other exercises we might do as a threat. So I think that being able to withstand that load, you're getting that. That's what it's built for. I mean, the research is there in terms of it builds elasticity at a significantly higher rate than any gravity-based training we can do, besides obviously plyometric exercises and sprinting. We already get that, and you put that on top of the feedback from the athlete and the buy-in from the athlete, their perception. I mean, that's best bang for your buck right there.
Thoughts on combining this with short coupling extensive jumps as kind of hitting both ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of times when I talk to people is, they'll ask, is this completely taking away jumps? Obviously, it's not taking away jumps, right? I mean, it's not addressing the foot ankle complex, which is something that we need to obviously make sure we address as much as possible. What this does, in my opinion, it allows us to put a lot of energy into our low-level elastic jumps, our pogo work, our low-level hurdle jumps, multi-directional jumps. It allows us to put more time into acceleration and velocity patterns, sprinting patterns. It allows us to put more time into change of direction, which again is just high motor skill acquisition in a controlled setting that hopefully again transfers better to the actual field or court or wherever you're playing. Because we don't need to spend as much time with certain movements in the weight room, because the kBox already does what two patterns might do together, right? An Olympic pattern and a traditional squat, what those might do together, the kBox does in one, with one pattern. So now I can spend more time, more energy on some of those low-level plyometric exercises, more elasticity-based exercises, and then transition those into higher rate of force development at quick ground contact times in terms of sprinting, bounding, and things like that.
I love it, Mark. I love it. Now, you also are cooking something else out there. I'd be remiss if we don't talk about this event you guys got towards the end of the month.
Yeah, no, it's I'm extremely excited about the event. It's August 9th and 10th here on campus for us. Campus, most people probably have never been to SIUE or maybe even heard of it. It's a beautiful campus, and we have a great venue to be able to host this event. And the company Eccentrics is the primary host. They've done a fantastic job of getting what is by far one of the better lineups I've seen. It's very guys that have all presented at your conference before, which is always top of the line guys. You're talking Mike Young, that's going to be talking about how he implements isoinertial training within his elite level track and field athletes. Jeff Moyer coming in to talk about, and you mentioned Jeff earlier. That guy's a genius, and everything he taught. He's super entertaining when he presents and when he talks. But the amount of knowledge he has is just insane. We'll be presenting how we use it within our, globally within all of our student athletes, and how I think a lot of people that haven't seen it, they need the exposure of actually seeing it in a team setting. We'll show a lot of our case study research that we've done comparing gravity training and force plates and things like that. And then Randy Ballard from Illinois is going to be speaking. Randy is phenomenal. He's going to talk a lot about what our and then two, kind of how that baseline monitoring can impact and dictate some of what we do in the return to play process. And a lot of that is just kind of active and mean impulse and stiffness and things like that, which obviously the kBox has a huge benefit in training. And then Landon Evans will be the last presenter. And Landon, I mean, is a genius. I mean, that guy knows everything, and he's essentially going to talk about what he's doing at University of Iowa, because they have so much technology, they have so much equipment and things like that. But he's going to actually talk about, okay, we're tracking this, and this, but how do we turn that into actionable data? What are we using this for, and how are we doing that?
I love it, man. And where can people find out more info about it?
So it's on the Eccentrics website. It's the Eccentrics High Performance Clinic, and you can get all the details on the itinerary, the speakers, where to register is on that website. Hotels are on that website. Eccentrics has done a great job in terms of they're trying to make this as efficient for the attendees as possible. So damn near all the meals are paid for as part of your registration. So it's a Friday night or Friday afternoon is Mike Young, the keynote speaker. There's going to be a social afterwards. That next day they're providing breakfast, they provide lunch, and then there's going to be a speaker Q&A roundtable to finish out the day on Saturday. But yeah, all that information is on the Eccentrics website, it's been social media blasted out from Jeff has been blasting it out. I know Mike is a little bit. We have, and Eccentric has as well.
Awesome, man. And we'll make sure we got that link underneath it. And stoked for you guys, man. That's going to be a blast.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mark, really appreciate your time, brother. Love what you're doing out there, man. Can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll be in touch real soon.
All right. Thank you.
And a huge thanks to SIUE's Mark Jamison for spending the time with us today. Guys, open, honest, candid sharing. A man literally breaking down the what's, whys, and hows of how they're training their student athletes out there. I can't thank Mark enough for being so open, honest, and candid with his sharing today. And guys, make sure you're checking out what they've got going on out there for August 9th, the Eccentric High Performance Clinic. The lineup is sensational. The link is in the notes. If there's any way you can get out there and check it out, please do so. This is a great continuing education opportunity. Mark, I can't thank you enough for all the work putting that together, brother. I know what that's like. So truly grateful for your efforts to try to make us all better. Thank you for all you're doing. Keep up the great work, brother. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the talk, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. We are just trying to get the best information out there to all the great coaches that we can. And as always, guys, thank you for everything that you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.